Apologies for those of you over on YouTube. If you saw it, just stop and start back. There was some technical difficulties going on there. My apologies, my apologies. Where were we? Right, we were with Mrs. Prasad Bisasa, our former Prime Minister, who is now saying some unique things about the formation of Trinidad. What's the topic tonight, Kremak? We're talking about our opposition leader and her comments dealing with our independence and how we attained our independence. Now, she is saying that we didn't fight for independence. The United Kingdom was just giving it away. They were giving it away. It wasn't a fight. And she's basically saying this, to be fair to her, she's basically, for the most part, she's highlighting this as pointing against the PNM, framing it as they fought for it. And she is saying no one had to fight for independence. It was being given away. So PNM cannot really take any credit for this. Olawudra says neoliberalism, world systems theory are important in understanding metropole and periphery. Okay, good. Right. Now, her argument, part of what she was saying, is that all the British colonies got their independence at the same time. Britain was just giving it away and they didn't want any more. Now, the thing is, I am not denying that Britain gave us our independence for a big part. It wasn't like it was something very hard fought and hard won. But it is incorrect to say that Britain was giving away at the same time independence to all of their territories, because there's actually a timeline where you can literally go and see the different years when when former British colonies were given their independence and when some of them fought for it, obviously. But during the 1900s, for nearly the entirety of the 1900s, different territories, different countries got their independence at different times. So it wasn't all at the same time. And the reality is whether Britain was giving away independence or not, independence still took procedure. We are still under British law. We are still under British style of law, yes. And our highest court is still the Privy Council. That is correct. But I don't understand necessarily the relevance of that to the independence statement. And we're still following the Westminster system. We're still following British parliamentary system. So, like, what were we supposed to do? Cancel all of that and attempt to reinvent the wheel? I think the attempt to move further away from the free market, looking more towards that Soviet style of running things that many of the independent countries and territories ran to once they got their independence, I think a lot of that worked against many of these territories. The territories that went into the government holding more power than the citizens, they generally have worse outcomes. Anyway, back to what Mrs. Prasad Bisasa was saying. After the Second World War, we were pulling them down. Sugar had gone. We were lucky we had oil. She said the PNM inherited from the British a country blessed by God with abundant natural resources and a multicultural population living in harmony and safety. Now, here's my problem with this. These two things don't really go together. In one sentence, she is saying that we were an anchor on the British. We were holding them down. We were bleeding them because sugar was gone. The industry had dried up and they wanted to get rid of us. But then the very next line, she's saying that the PNM inherited from the British a country blessed by God and with abundant natural resources and a multicultural population living in harmony and safety. If the country was running so perfectly and so wealthy, why would the British just want to get rid of it? Those two things don't actually seem to be adding up. If it was that the country was difficult to manage efficiently and as it will manage at a profit, if that's the reason that the British was getting rid of the territories in the first place, then you would say that what the PNM would have inherited was something actually a bit difficult to run. But if it is that we were just so blessed and so abundant with natural resources, and the people here were already living so peacefully, and the place was already safe. It was a perfect capsule of abundant profit. Then why would the British just give it away? Would the British just, out of the goodness of their heart, giving it away? That doesn't seem to be what she's saying. So I'm just reading those two statements again before I go on further. After the Second World War, we were pulling them down. Sugar had gone. We were lucky we had oil. She said the PNM inherited from the British a country blessed by God with abundant natural resources and a multicultural population living in harmony and safety. After 50 years of PNM in power, they have wreaked havoc and destroyed our country, with its worst incarnation happening in the last 7 years under Keith Rowley. Now, to me, yes, the YouTube is back up right now. Yes, I believe it is back up. My apologies for those of you over on YouTube. Yes, it is back up. Now, for me, I like the nuance of history. History oftentimes isn't as straightforward as sometimes your primary school history books might have it. Yes, 14 character on the inside. Good night, good night, good night. There's some nuance to it. And it wasn't that the PNM fought tooth and nail and won a war for our independence. No. But if it was that the British didn't want the country anymore because it wasn't really profitable for them to run, then you could appreciate that the country at that point in time wouldn't have exactly been a paradise for a governing body. Can politics exist without economics or vice versa? Now, it's according to what you mean by politics. I don't think any politics can exist without economics. But if by politics you mean the style of politics we have, yes, I think economics can exist without that style of politics. Economics, for the most part, is just trade. Once you have people free, well, not necessarily freely, but people trading with each other. Anyway, this seems to me to be a bit of historical revisionism in a kind of sense, where it's nearly like the former prime minister is saying that Trinidad and Tobago was great back in 1962 under British rule, and if we could go back in time to then, we would be so much better off than we are now. And the reality, here's the thing. I don't know how many of you are willing to buy into political narratives. The reality is that is a lie. The reality is, if any of you could have opened a portal and stepped back into 1962, 60 years ago, and lived your life back then, now some of you may say yes, because you like that whole nostalgic old-time feel, but the reality is, you spend some time back then and you'd realize you much rather live now. Now, to say that everything got better since then, no, that's not true. Enrique asked, do you think corruption would ever end for the most part in Trinidad? I don't think corruption would end in humanity. Corruption is a human problem. The problem with corruption in Trinidad is that we have so much government influence in so many different areas that corruption is more impactful. It's like, if you think about it this way, now, this is, as it were, in the extreme, but people paying a bribe to some customs officer or someone on the port, they're doing that to speed up the process because that's government run and it's inefficient, and if you really want your thing done right, you're going to pay a bribe, etc. Now, if there was no government involvement there, then you wouldn't have a bribe to pay. You would literally have to pay whoever it is running the port. And the faster they do it, the faster they get money, and there's no need for a bribe, there's no need for corruption. Now, I am not saying that that system is going to be perfect, because that system would very likely exclude, or has a tendency to exclude, some of those on the lower end of the system. But in terms of efficiency, the government getting in there really is the thing that decreases efficiency, and the corruption oftentimes is a reaction to attempt to speed up efficiency inside of an over-regulated system. What if you look at areas that have high corruption? There's nearly no area in the world that simultaneously has high corruption and low regulation. High corruption is nearly always synonymous with high levels of government regulation. That's kind of the only reason corruption makes sense. So if you want to decrease some of the corruption, well, we will never, as I said, we'll never get rid of corruption. It's a human issue. And further than that, I think on the systemic level, it's getting rid of some of the government influence in some of this. So URP, CPEP, etc., etc. It's not that they don't serve a purpose, but they are slush funds for government corruption for a large part. You look at the amount of money that is spent in URP, and if you were to divide that by all the workers you see at the side of the road, you'd recognize that a significant chunk of money doesn't go to those workers that we're supposed to be feeling sorry for. And I'm not saying this in a mocking tone, I'm saying it really realistically. For those workers that we are supposed to be feeling sorry for, those people who are supposed to be getting the help, if you look at it, there's just a certain percentage that goes down to them, but a large percentage also is used to, spread merriment otherwise. And if you wanted to remove that corruption, beside the human component, it's just to remove the government being involved in it in the first place. So there's that to consider. And as I was speaking about last night, also part of the reality in Trinidad and Tobago, where we love this big government style, this ruling style, what the opposition is basically asking for is for us to remain a colony and remain under the rule of a foreign power. That sounds kind of ridiculous to me. And the thing is, you cannot hope to get things done the way you want it if you were under that rule. Let me look at a simple example, an example that I don't necessarily even agree with, but an example of the reality that we would have been living in. I remember Satmaraj and the SDMS. They launched a lawsuit against Trinidad, basically, to get us to change from our highest award from the Trinity Cross. He wanted that changed on religious grounds. Now, you could do that much more easily when you could face the head of the country right there. Do you think we up for some struggles? What do you think about BRICS? What do you mean BRICS? BRICS as in the organization with Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa? Is that BRICS you're talking about, or some other BRICS? And well, I think they may be in the ascendancy to some extent, because the US is playing with fire and they're weakening themselves continuously in a whole set of navel gazing nonsense, kind of end of empire foolishness they were playing over there. So yeah, but Satmaraj and that request he wanted for that change of the highest order in Trinidad, from the highest award in Trinidad, from being that Trinity Cross to now it's the Order of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, which, just as a side note, this is a side note. Trinidad itself means Trinity. The name of the country itself pertains to the Trinitarian God. To say the Order of the Republic of the Trinity kind of still has the Trinity in it. Now, I understand the cross and whole business, but to me, there's some history in it. So, but to each their own. Either way, if we were being ruled by the British, I could tell you very likely that you would have had no say in that whole thing. You would have called, as they say, till the cows come home, and nothing. You are able to get a lot of those things done because you can access the leadership here. The leadership may not be as accessible as you'd like, but I can promise you it's more accessible than the British. And many people look through history with rose-colored glasses on, and they look back and think of, oh, look at that beautiful time. But if you go back and you read and you hear from people who were living back in those times, it wasn't all merriment. It was not all merriment. So to me, the benefit many people talk about, the benefits people talk about with remaining a British colony is not for Trinidad. They aren't talking about benefits for Trinidad. They're talking about benefits for themselves because they would have been a British citizen. So what they are actually saying is not that Trinidad would have benefited from remaining a colony. What they're saying is I would benefit from being a British citizen, which is fine and which might be factual, but it's not the same thing as saying Trinidad would have benefited. Yes, you might benefit from being a British citizen, by all means, but that's not the same thing as trying to revise history to make it seem like Trinidad would have been in a perfect run if we remained as a British colony. That's ahistorical. At the time this country became independent, she said, this is back to Mrs. Prasad Bisesa and what she's saying there. At the time this country became independent, she said, it was on the same GDP per capita levels as Singapore and Hong Kong. In fact, ours was slightly higher. Having been blessed with so many gifts, she said, Titi should have still been on par with those countries. Today, after 60 years, where do we stand compared to Singapore and Hong Kong? Singapore GDP per capita is US $72,000 and Hong Kong over US $49,000. Remember, we were richer than these countries. So where are we when you compare? US 15,000 GDP per capita. Now, these comparisons, as I like to point out so often, as it gets sometimes tiring of pointing out, these comparisons do not make sense because the countries are not the same. You cannot look at a country like Hong Kong, where the majority of the population is homogenous. They're the same people, same culture, nearly all. Singapore, where it's even where there's some mixing in cultures, the other dominant ethnic groupings in Singapore is Chinese. So it's all Asian in Singapore. There's a different culture, and many of them share the same culture. You cannot compare those countries at the same with Trinidad and Tobago, where there's the multicultural melting pot business going on here. That's one. Two, the economics of those countries weren't the same. As I was just pointing out, if you look, one of the major differences is Hong Kong and Singapore went to much more free market deregulated systems. Much more free market deregulated systems. That's how Hong Kong and Singapore functioned. They opened up their markets. They had no regulations. Investors, please come in by the large numbers. That's what they did. That's not what Trinidad did. We had government owning Caroni. We had government owning Petrotrin. Some of the largest companies in the country were run by the state. We had the state having the public service. We had the state having so many social programs just to catch every single person who might slip through the cracks. And for Mrs. Prasad Bisesa to come in and acting like we weren't there when she and the UNC were in governance. The UNC is a left-wing party in terms of how they were founded. They were founded as a Labour Party, the United Labour Front. They got in there thinking left-wing style policies. Mrs. Prasad Bisesa was the same one who wanted to give out milk. That's more from the government. If you want to go down the road of Singapore and Hong Kong, then when you got into power, what you were supposed to be doing was deregulating the economy and getting the state, getting the government out of business. That was the direction you were supposed to be going in. Christopher Yao says some authoritarianism also in Singapore. Well, lots of authoritarianism, but I was talking just on the economic front. But yes, there was quite a bit of authoritarianism in Singapore. But to some extent, the hold that our first prime minister had on the country, he had the ability to do some of those authoritarian policies. And here's the thing. Living now, 2022, if some authoritarian, understand the context I'm saying this in, please. If Dr. Eric Williams would have done some authoritarian policies back then that would have benefited us now, I would have shrugged at it in present tense. I'm not saying I want authoritarian policies, but I guess I'm hoping you'll understand the context I'm saying in. So the authoritarian policies, yes, that was part of Singapore also. It was. Unfortunately, authoritarianism is now part of Hong Kong too, as they are now back as part of mainland China under the rule of the CCP. I just think Trinidad is losing all its resources for no reason. What do you mean for no reason? That's not true. We're living in luxury, like Trinidadians. I mean, I say this kind of regular. We have to have some perspective. We have to have some perspective. Trinidadians live in luxury in comparison to the majority of people in the world. One of the things, and I point this out, the thing that really and truly is terrible in Trinidad, any way you look at it, is the violent crime. That legitimately is bad, any way you slice it. But if you're talking about economy-wise, yeah, real Trinis like to talk about eating grass and etc., 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 but living in Trinidad, economics-wise, is not that hard. I went through the data. This isn't something I'm just talking, guessing here. If you were in the live, in some of the earlier lives, I went through the data. I don't know how many of you might recall when the representative for, was it our Miss World or Miss Universe or some one of those pageants, was talking about something about the poverty in her home country. And I went through the data. There's no one in absolute poverty in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, there's relative poverty and some one of those fancy United Nations terms poverty that basically says you aren't getting all the access to resources that you're supposed to get in a country like ours. And fair enough, but there isn't that kind of level, if we're being fair. We lost Petrotrin and the country is still hard. It wasn't for the better. I agree. Petrotrin, the loss of Petrotrin, I think, was for the better, to be very honest. Earl Panton says those Asian countries had one mind, one focus, and plans for development were continued regardless. Yet they have a different mindset. Listen, you look at Asians, yes, they're homogeneous society, but also the culture itself of many of the Asians. Obviously, all Asians aren't the same, but if you look by and large, look at Asian populations in the United States, in Canada, in the United Kingdom. And I'm talking that Asian as in Chinese, Singapore, Far East Asian. You look at most of those populations in nearly any country they go into, and they very quickly ascend to some of the highest earners. And there has been research that has gone into it, and it has to do with their culture. They have that excelling culture. They push for excellence. Now, the thing is, on the grand scale, maybe you would prefer a more relaxed life with your family and not just pushing to get the A+ in math for every time. And maybe who is to say which life is more fulfilling? But the fact is, their culture, what they do, does provide that result. They have that. And you could see it even in the countries themselves, how many of those countries are run. So, to compare ourselves to Singapore, Hong Kong, it's kind of ridiculous. It really is kind of ridiculous. According to Mrs. Prasad Visesa, the PNM destroyed the foundations of our society. The railroad destroyed. Now, to me, I vexed with that one with the railroad destroyed. I wasn't there. Maybe there was a good reason, but now looking back, I cannot see the good reason. I'm vexed about the railroad business. Richard Glubman says no matter how good the project or plan, once the government change, most time it is scrapped. That's true. Yes, the railroad destroyed. Carony and agriculture destroyed. Petrotrin destroyed, Point Lisas destroyed, iron and steel production destroyed, safety and security destroyed, national harmony destroyed, democracy destroyed. The trail of destruction goes on and on from way back. Now, you could look at this and say it's the PNM, but you could also look at this and say it's government. The common factor in all of this is government. Question of topic: do you drink coconut water every day? Is that healthy? I wish I drank coconut water every day. I'm just not at that kind of balling lifestyle, but but I do drink a lot of coconut water. I have some coconut trees coming up in my garden. When all my coconut trees reach the maturity, I may be drinking coconut water on a regular. Earl Panton says societal discipline also was a major ingredient for success. Correct. But yes, these things, you could all label them, yes, PNM, but you could also label them as government in and of itself. And it wasn't only the PNM government in power during that time, and we cannot look back and say that these government-run companies did better under the UNC. The numbers do not tell that story. So for them to point at it and try to make it only a PNM thing, I don't think so. I think this is a government thing. The government destroyed the railroad. The government destroyed Carney and agriculture. The government destroyed Petrotrin. The government, well, Point Lisas isn't destroyed, and they're going on with some extras there. No matter who's in power, Trinidad needs prayers and stop the ungodly parading in Port of Spain. And poor work ethic too. Yes, the poor work ethic is true, but I think the poor work ethic was symptomatic of the government being in control of those things. The reason people could have survived in these companies, in these industries with poor work ethic for so long was because the government was in charge and the government was just giving out sweetheart deals to the workers out there. If these things were run privately from the very beginning, they would not have been run the same. And I think our work ethic would have been a lot different. But a lot of our workers were trained in how to work. Their work ethic was cultivated in state enterprises, in government work. And then that culture seems to have trickled down throughout the rest of the country. The obstacle to our development, Mrs. Prasad Bisessa says, for the past 60 years has always been the PNM. And the Rowley government is the worst of them all. Sheesh. Whew. Yeah, she went in deep there. She went in deep there. But I think the Prime Minister looks for some of that extra because sometimes he brings them up when he doesn't even need to. Earl Panton says, our history don't mention the opposition parties who opposed initiatives that would have benefited us. That's true. Matthew Camejo, but could it be that this government purposefully skewed the statistics to make the UNC look bad? I'm not talking about present statistics. There were statistics written through time. Like, you could go back to the statistics we had from 2010 to 2015. You could look at the amount of money that was spent by NGC. You could look at the amount of extra projects NGC took up during that time. Like, the numbers are there. I don't know if you ever heard to Tupac, even though it seems heaven sent, we ain't ready to see a black president. Humble Boy Noel says, I think I heard you talk about for-profit and non-profit differences. I have a dream that one day little boys and girls can take the train from Grandy to Port of Spain. Boy, I have that dream too. As I said before, if I could go back in time, that one we will fight for. I want real fight. Whoever was the person, I wonder, probably somebody in the cabinet had a hookup on importing buses and they thought buses were the thing of the future. I want to go back in time and I want real fight. I want a lot of fight. Whoever it was, decide that we're going to invest in TTPS and a set of buses up and down the place and scrap our train system that already built and have all the train tracks as people fence posts all around the place. Like, there are still people with fence posts made out of train tracks up to this day. What's there to celebrate for independence? Your life. Richard Glubman asks the majority of problems that Trinidad faces because of the attitude of its citizenry. A train could be better than them old buses any day. Any day. Someone asks what's there to celebrate for independence. Like this, I think anyone who is at that level of mindset is too consumed by politics. Anyone who is asking questions like, what's there to celebrate about independence? And Trinidad down to the dogs, there's nothing to celebrate our independence for. That kind of question, to me, seems like someone that is already too in-depth in political narrative. You may need to pull back from whatever your circle is. You may need to pull back from whatever your circle is and rewind a little bit and get some larger perspective on something. Because a nation, you could check my independence video as it drops tomorrow. Check that one out. I'm going to talk on that a bit. But a nation refers to the people. A nation isn't the government. A nation isn't the state. A nation is the people. It's the people bound by that common culture, that common history, the common language, etc. When you're talking about celebrating independence, you're talking about celebrating the independence of that nation, of us as a people, of us as a joint culture. If you have nothing in common with anyone in the country of Trinidad and Tobago, then you are not part of this nation, and by all means, you go do what you have to do. But if you are part of this nation where you have that commonality, you're willing to share that common culture, that common history, etc., there's always something to celebrate about our common shared history and the fact that it still exists. Celebrations throughout humanity's history were not necessarily based on whether things were better now than they were before. A lot of these celebrations were just based on the fact that we are still here. New Year's, you celebrate New Year's whether you had a good year or a bad year. The celebration is that you're making it into a next year. But are we really independent? Now, I've seen that question before, and my question to that is, what do you mean by really independent? Like, are you talking about outside of the control of any global forces? And if that's the case, I will say no countries are really independent. If you're talking about if we have the ability as a sovereign nation to write our own laws, then I would say yes, we are independent. If you're asking whether writing those laws, they are the 1% and the wealthy people in the country, and they have a strong say on the laws that are written, so therefore we are not independent, and then to that I'd say, well, most countries function like that too. Prav868 says, from being the third wealthiest in the Western Hemisphere to being compared to Grenada. Where did you get that information, Prav868? I'd like to know the source of that information, because I don't know where the source of that information is. Prav868 says Trinidad was richer than Dubai at a point in time. Okay. What Eric Williams said, money is not an issue. Yes. And yes, there are historical mistakes that did happen. Okay. And yes, Trinidad was richer than Dubai. And Dubai has oil and they have a dictatorship. I can assure you, you don't want to be a regular citizen inside of Dubai. You want to be a rich person inside of Dubai. You don't want to go there and live like a normal person. Like, you don't want Trinidad to be ruled like Dubai. Imagine if, I suppose you do not like Dr. Rowley. Imagine if Dr. Rowley wasn't Dr. Rowley. He was Sheikh Rowley, the king of Trinidad and Tobago. And his children were going to rule Trinidad and Tobago for the next coming few years. And their children would rule Trinidad and Tobago after that. That is what Dubai has. And probably if Trinidad and Tobago was run like that, King Rowley would have been able to get all the plans he wanted executed, and Trinidad and Tobago might have looked like Dubai, but I can assure you, you would not have wanted to live in the country like that. freedom, freedom has its consequences. Freedom has its consequences. A dictatorship gets things done efficiently. But do you really want to live in that? G. Antonio says, just take a look at Ukraine independence last week. The celebration was as great and more meaningful than ever. Great is the free. Exactly. Empress says, you will not see or hear Haitians or Jamaicans speak badly of their country, and here isn't as bad. Yes, you will hear some Haitians and Jamaicans speak badly of their country, actually. Now, something that I notice is as countries become wealthier and they become freer, the citizens criticize them more ruthlessly and more brutally. No citizens criticize their own country as much as the United States. And those people are living in luxury. You're watching some overweight person living in complete luxury, barely has to work a day in their life, and is talking about the system fighting them down in the United States. Like, okay, something isn't adding up there. It's that kind of thing you see very regularly. The ease allows people to complain more, actually. The success of Dubai, JKM says, is part of their dictatorship at the cost of Western freedom. Apparently, Hulk Smash says the 1% would see the happy 60th anniversary. What about the 99% of the real Trinbagos? Like, what are you saying, Hulk Smash? Are you incapable of being happy? You know, what really kind of grinds my gears? What really kind of grinds my gears? When I see so many people always speaking on behalf of some hypothetical poor person, I am almost 100% certain that no one watching this live right now at 10 in the night on the internet, just streaming like they have nothing else to do, I am almost 100% certain none of you are struggling for the essential things in life. But people in this chat would speak about things like, you know, what about the hard strugglers inside of Trinidad now, boy? What about the poor people now, boy? Yeah, that is for the 1%. The 1% could celebrate the happy independence. But we 99%, we don't have no happy independence in a dog. It's grass we eating in it. But you're always saying that on behalf of somebody else who you suppose is eating grass. Because you are not eating the grass. When you speak to someone who says something like that, they're like, well, not me, but there are people in Trinidad and Tobago really suffer. Are you suffering? No, not me, I'm okay. But there are some. Well, where are the some? And when you speak to the some, let's speak about solutions. Let's speak about solutions to the some, because what you would realize is very often the solutions for some of those some that are really suffering doesn't really have to do with bad governance from the PNM. Many of the times it may be bad decisions. It may be very unfortunate circumstances. But yeah, we are nothing to celebrate, we are nothing to be happy for. And you're sitting probably in an air-conditioned room, smiling at your phone with your Wi-Fi running. Like, are you thinking about the amount of privilege, to use the woke people in the word? Are you thinking about the amount of privilege you have to sit there and say that I am not happy? There's nothing to be happy in this country about. On my $1,000 smartphone, on Wi-Fi, celebrating 60 years of freedom in a country that doesn't generally have political unrest. Hulk Smash says, bro, you misunderstood me. I'm a sufferer. I am one of the 99% of the Trinbago. Okay, Hulk Smash, how are you suffering? Come tell us, how are you suffering right now? Are you suffering so badly that you cannot pay for Wi-Fi or data anymore? And the thing is, as I prefaced this with, this isn't a pro-government thing. The nation is the people. The nation refers to the body of people bound by that common descent, that common history, that common culture, that common language. We have that history trailing back hundreds of years to natives coming over from the mainland in South America, coming to Trinidad and starting the history of the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. We have that continuous history coming even to this day. And the 60th independence, I will see that as a symbolic stamp, as it were, on this identity of this nation that was formed through these. Check the YouTube comments. Oh, wow. The YouTube comments are going. All right, I'll check it just now. Yeah, and we have that common history that is coming through the hundreds of years of these people. People who fought colonization, people who somehow were able to integrate, the Amerindians who never saw anyone from anywhere else but this western side of the world. They were able to integrate with the Europeans, who were then able to eventually integrate with Africans, integrate with Asians, and create a unique special culture that somehow is able to, yes, with strain, with quite a bit of strain, agreed, but with that strain is somehow able to survive and able to not only survive but thrive. And then we would look at that and think, because yes, there are some horrible decisions made by politicians in modern day, and we would take that, those bad decisions made by politicians, and take that to see, let's cast a negative light on the day to celebrate all of that history. Really? Does that make sense? If I may, isn't suffering subjective? By what metric should we use for its measure? Okay. Now, suffering is subjective, but there are objective standards to suffering. Here's what I mean. How much you suffer internally is subjective. That's up to you. That's up to you. How much you suffer on the inside, how you feel, that is subjective. But suffering, you can quantify suffering in terms of human need, because we know what humans need. We know what humans need. If a human is lacking the amount of food they require to be alive, they are suffering. If a human is lacking the amount of water they need, the amount of clean water they need to survive, they are suffering. If a human cannot find shelter outside of the elements to sleep, they are suffering. Now, subjectively, you may consider your Wi-Fi dropping every 5 minutes to be suffering. And fair enough, there may be some suffering involved with that. But objectively, that wouldn't be on the human level of suffering like that. All right, let me see some of those YouTube comments that were piling in. True, but does the nation state not comprise of persons born within the borders of the nation or naturalized citizens that identify with the nation state? Correct. I would question if the nation was some disconnected immaterial being, what then would it choose for the very persons that uphold its life force in that allegorical manner? Would it prefer for its citizens, if by referendum and acceptance of referendum, were to dissolve the nation of Trinidad and Tobago and become incorporated with the UK? Or would it rather that its all right, now, I didn't state with the nation being the people part that it involves them sharing the same country. Yes, the nation is the people. The nation is the body of people that share that same common descent, that share that common language, common history, common culture, but they also share a common country. You can't really be a nation if you're not in the same country. So yeah, that's a part of it. Into the foreign nation, Trinidad. By your own admission, individual native persons, which would already be a shared culture and history outside of Trinidadian culture due to its non-existence. Furthermore, let me read this. Furthermore, I question if the nation is comprised of individuals bounded by mainly culture and history. Then what is the harm to the nation if absorbed by a foreign nation and citizens integrated into the foreign nation? Can that not just be seen as an extension as well as an evolution of the nation, which contains the underlying history and culture of Trinidad and Tobago? Yes, that is what that would be. Yes, that is what that would be. So this person over on YouTube, that's over on YouTube, the questions over there. Yes, they're saying if a nation is to be assimilated into another nation, if that would then make them just a new nation. And yes, that is the history of the world. Like, if Trinidad and Tobago was to be conquered by Venezuela, and Venezuela was able to keep that conquest for the next 50 years, for the next 100 years, where generations die out, Trinidad and Tobago eventually would be assimilated into the nation of Venezuela. And part of our common Trinidad and Tobago history and culture eventually would be assimilated into that new thing. All right. Now, I want to do one more article before we dive out. Leave the politics back, because I want to jump into some school business. Some school business quickly. Underperforming SEA students to write another exam in 2 years. Now, this is coming on the this is coming on the heels of some questions to do with the vacation study program that they did. Yo, interesting. Good night. This has to do with some questions received about that, the vacation revision program. And this is on the heels of trying to answer some of these questions. Levi Hussein, in my opinion, fix roads, clean running water, and proper drainage to reduce the majority of flooding and the domino effects. Most of us won't have much to talk about. I agree, Levi Hussein. I agree. In the midst of a significant decline in performance in the secondary entrance examination, shouldn't that be secondary entrance assessment, SEA, in 2022, the Ministry of Education initiated the vacation revision program aimed at getting the approximately 9,000 students who scored 50% and under up to secondary school standard. However, based on statistics revealed by the Chief Education Officer, Dr. Peter Smith, at a news conference yesterday, the program was undersubscribed. It was anticipated that approximately 9,000 would have attended the VRP, the vacation revision program, with approximately 600 teachers providing the instruction. Approximately 1,900 attended the vacation revision program, Smith said. Are you all following that? 9,000 students got below 50%, was supposed to be there in the vacation for the vacation revision program. 1,900 showed up. Now, just as a side note, to see how government uses resources, bear in mind, very likely the money spent to do this, no, they are placed in secondary schools already, by the way. The money spent to do this would have been spent regardless. Wait, someone is complaining about working hard there? Some of the young have that complaints, but Hulk smash refugees, meaning what? Overcrowding a smaller country for what they wasn't able to do in there. I'm not going down that road right now. Anyway, 9,000 students basically failed. They were supposed to get that remedial program. Only 1,900 showed up. He said a report on the program, he said a pre-test and a post-test were administered to the students in order to gauge the effectiveness of the program, which will now be continued until 2027. That's more money for the Ministry of Education to spend, by the way. That's more money they're going to be spending. and we're seeing the results as glorious as they are. By the way, just so you know, Mindful Education is starting group classes come September. Well, come the new term, we are starting group classes. I'm looking to have a junior primary and a senior primary, and we'll have a junior secondary and a senior secondary. 4 classes we're looking to have. The spaces, as it is, the spaces are looking to be around 6 students per class. That's the number. More details will come out. So if you're over there on Instagram, Mindful Education, we're looking to start up and try to get some in-person teaching going on there. And we would be doing personal tutoring also. That's aside. But trying to get some personal teaching, some classes going out there that hopefully would be able to provide something better than what we have. I just tired say, how do these children reach to standard and still some can't read? Yes, I am going to do preschool also. Well, not me personally, but we will be doing preschool also. But that one has to start in the new year. Who? They should standardize books for all levels of school and stop the bleeding from that level. Ah, boy, have to hustle for that, baby, on the way. Massimo says, yes, yes, yes. I sending in my resume. Do that. I told another person that already. My email, you could find my email there and you can email me. I'm very serious and I plan on working for what I want. Good. You work for what you want to. But yes, they're going to be extending this vacation revision program till 2027. Now, many of the teachers, they are going to be paid either way. But would this be the most efficient use of our resources? All right. Dr. Smith said also moving forward, the ministry has a plan to revise the operations of 26 schools. Now, you're listening to this for me. Listen to this. The ministry has a plan to revise the operations of 26 schools where the underperforming students will be attending as part of a 5-year plan. Now, I remember having a discussion in one of these lives and saying that I didn't agree with the removal of the junior sec system in the first place. I didn't agree with the idea that all students writing the secondary entrance assessment must be placed in a secondary school. I never agreed with that. Because I think it's a matter of fact that different students perform at different levels for various reasons. And it does not make sense that we bunch all of them together because it's going to slow down the ones that could have been pushing ahead and it's going to confuse the ones that are being left behind. It does not work. It does not make sense. But in pursuit of equity, everyone got a place. We did away with the junior sex. We don't want that stigma. Let's not stigmatize the children. Like if in schools, there wouldn't be stigma based on your performance anyway. Like, performance cannot be ascertained within the school. Like schools aren't going to victimize the ones who are performing badly anyway. The stigma doesn't have to do with the school being named junior secondary school. The stigma has to do with the school having children who perform less than satisfactory. That's where the stigma comes from. If you want to remove the stigma, you don't change the name, you increase the performance of the students, or you allow the students to perform in areas that they can excel. Now, I was saying that months ago. Now, here the ministry comes to say that they're going to have a plan to revise the operations of 26 schools. So, after you did away with a junior sec system where what we were trying to do now, granted, I'm not saying those systems were perfect by any means, but if you were trying to better that, I would have thought that you would specialize. Ooh, battery is on low there. I would have thought that you would specialize You would specialize those schools more so that they are better able to see about the needs of the students that they see about. But no, you cancel all of that. And now you have to recreate special schools to see about those special needs again. And here's the thing. Here, and this is the part that annoys me with government, and sometimes and gives me that kind of cynical edge where I could feel like, leave government out of everything and we would be better. So here's the thing. We would have had to spend money. We would have had to spend money to undo the junior secondary education system. And now we are going to have to re-spend money to redo something different, but with a similar idea. Right. Government makes sense. Come, you all better sign up to Mindful Education. Quick, get your children out of that system. I'm playing. All right. Further than that, there's more to it. According to the Minister of Education, the first phase of that plan will see all the students in question retested in 2 years. Now, the junior sex used to do this in 3 years. They would retest you in 3 years. Now they're saying they're redoing this system and it's going to be in 2 years. 2 years. We aren't going to recreate the junior sex system. No, this isn't what we're doing, but we're going to have to retest them in 2 years. It is the 14 plus, True Ninja. It is the 14 plus. They're recreating the same 14 plus from the same junior sec days. It's the same thing. The students who would have scored under 50, they will be required to do what was formerly the primary school leaving. It is now the lower secondary proficiency examination. So they will do that in Form 2, she said. The minister admitted that the time frame for the VRP was simply not enough for what is to be accomplished. We understand that 4 weeks of instruction, though it would have been important in engaging the students and reducing the learning loss that would have taken place when they were not engaged, would not be enough to meet the needs of the students. That is why we have instituted the revised operations of schools, she explained. She said a lot of focus will be placed on teacher training, on timetable adjustment, and assigning school social workers and guidance counselors. Oh, yes. So, basically, we're making full circle. We have made full circle. Back to a system where we have that junior sec division, where they have to have specialized schools to cater for students who are not performing that well. That is not a problem. You see, no. It's not junior sec, no. But they would be different. And like, it's so ridiculous. The idea that these things remove the stigma, they never did. They never did. There was always stigma, whether it was A class, B class, C class, D class, whether it was college to government school, whether it was you do sciences to business. The stigma isn't built in the name. You can't rename something and remove that. It's just not how it works. I think what we need to do is be able to face the fact and own up to the reality that students, children, perform at different levels. And the performance in education isn't a statement of your worth. A lot of this has to do with the fact that we live now in this expert world where everything has to be an expert. OG. Yes. I'll give you a little twirl of the mustache for that colonizer there. Yeah. We live in this expert world, and to pound the PNM government, as I like to do occasionally, the PNM government is a really expert party. Elitists. Elitists believe in the experts. Everything is the experts. Everything requires the experts. What that means is, in order to reach anywhere in this world, you must go to the very end of academia. And people that we look up to the most are the people who spent the longest in school. Now, through my reading, I could tell you that some of the most educated people are some of the people with the least wisdom. Communism is probably most supported by people in education. You explain to some parlor person, someone who owns a corner shop, you explain to them what communism is, and they're like, that does not make sense. That don't make no sense. But you have to be a special kind of educated to pull sense out of nonsense. So when we live in this expert world that we currently live in, it gives that pressure on the education system that the only way to really reach the top of anything is to be an expert, to spend as long as you can in the school system. I disagree. And I think if we're looking for some solutions to some of these things, we may be able to find some of these solutions in moving away from that kind of thinking, from the expert through schooling kind of thinking, understanding that there are many other ways to be successful in many other fields. And nothing should be looked down upon if someone decided to leave school after learning the basics and enter apprenticeship. Now, the problem is, in our society, we have erased the concept of apprenticeship. And what we may not understand, I don't agree necessarily with multiple intelligences. I think there are proficiencies and there's intelligence, but I understand what you mean. But what we have done to a large extent is we have erased apprenticeship. And what some people don't even get in asking for certain things. The unions regularly you hear the unions ask for this. We need a higher minimum wage. Let's raise the minimum wage, the minimum wage, the minimum wage, the minimum wage. Not realizing that the minimum wage is Xing out the entry-level jobs. Levi Hussein over on Instagram, Shogunus North produces some, if not of the best IT students, topping most competitions, yet no one wants to attend due to the stigma. Reality. An idea so foolish it could only come from the intelligentsia. I was trying to remember that very quote from Thomas Sowell. Thank you, Massimo. Levi Hussein says, bring back the vocational training. Some will excel better with hands-on. Correct. Correct. And apprenticeship is a key part of that. Now, what some people don't realize is by increasing the things like the minimum wage, that kills that apprenticeship idea. Now, if I am running a podcast, a live show, or something like that, and I want to expand a bit, but I'm not making any money. I'm barely making any money, if any. If someone wanted to leave school and come to work for me, but they were willing to do it for, sir, just buy me lunch, $50 a day, and that's all I could pay anyway. They could have come into the company, got that pay, and excelled at that, coming in at that entry level. And they're coming in at 16 years, 15 years old. They didn't even need much more money than that. The minimum wage was never intended for people to live on for the rest of their life. That person at 16 within a year may help the whole thing expand, and who knows what they would be making in that time. But if now the minimum wage is at $20 per hour, and if I want to hire you for the day, I have to pay you no less than $120 or something like that, I'm going to say, well, no, it doesn't make sense. I hire a 16-year-old. I might as well hire a 25-year-old just out of UE who is struggling to find a job anyhow. You come and work for me for minimum wage. And now we X out the 16-year-old. They cannot find a job, so we tell them, no, you have to spend 10 more years chasing your tail frustrated in school in order to come out, and then we would pay you the minimum wage job. Instead of allowing them to get that apprenticeship entry-level business, entry-level job, even before all that further schooling. And I could assure you, many students would be better off if they spent the time from, let's say, even Form 3, from 14 years to, if you were to go through to a bachelor's degree, that's what, 21, let's say. If you were to spend the time from 14 to 21, 7 years in apprenticeship, you very likely would be way better off than someone who spent that time in school and came out at 21 with a fresh bachelor degree. It's a great idea, but at this point, education operates via functionalism, a part of our life itself. So how would we change something like that? I don't fully understand what you mean by functionalism, to be very honest. A part of our life itself. What do you mean by it's a part of our life itself? Education was always a part of our life. So Massimo says, true, I think this point is really underrepresented in the management of our schooling systems. Yes, it is. It is. It is underrepresented. People don't look for that anymore. Do you know anyone under 18 who is an apprentice right now? Do you know anyone at all who is an apprentice right now? Apprenticeship kind of just evaporates. There were times now, not necessarily saying that the old days are the glory days in that kind of tone, but sorry, there was a time when you could have entered a job. You came into a factory and you entered sweeping the floor. And they would give you whatever they could scrape up at the end of the day and give it back to you. You worked really good at sweeping the floor. You upgraded to mopping the assembly line. You did really good at mopping the assembly line. You stayed out of people's way. You respected the workers. You learned something. You were looking at what they were doing. Yeah. Bam. Next thing you know, you're an apprentice at the start of the assembly line. Within the 7 years from 14 to 21 that it would have taken you to finish that bachelor's degree, where do you think you would be? Unknown says, meaning it's necessary and intellect only measured by academics. How do we as a people change something like that? What do you mean it's necessary? The amount of necessary education, I would say necessary education. I understand this could be very controversial to some, but necessary education in terms of functioning in our present system could have ended at standard 4. A good grasp of arithmetic, a good grasp of English language, English grammar, and necessary in terms of forcing everyone could have ended at standard 4. And then what I am saying is not that you will not be educated further than that, but the education further than that would be apprenticeship focused. I still find our education system is very generalized for a very long time, and the generalized way is in generals that actually don't help in the long run to some extent. Nisi says frustrating them to do subjects that they are not interested in until Form 5. And now the way with GATE, what GATE did was GATE made Form 6 seem like just a compulsory thing now too. That is true. My father is proof of that. There are many people within that boomer generation, 60 years and older. Many of those men, you talk to some men who might have been senior in the industry and talk to them and ask them how they started. Now, I could tell you, I remember the days when primary school teachers, there were some teachers in primary school that started teaching, leaving primary school, started teaching in the same primary school and continued there throughout. A primary school teacher with a primary school education. There were some of those in some of those more rural primary schools. And no, not Form 6. I'm talking the days before that. Before there was a strict qualification, especially in some of those religious schools. And you might be surprised the capability of some of those teachers. Listen, if someone was learning how to be a teacher from the age of 13, or a doctor from the age of 13, how good do you think they would be by the time they're 22, where someone who went through the school system would have gone through the entire thing and graduated? How good do you think they would have been? I think our education system needs a lot of that. It needs a lot of specializing. As I said, though, this is also a plug. This is also a plug for mindful education. That is, we are launching classes come September, come this term here. We are doing private tutoring. If you are interested in private tutoring, hit us up over on Instagram. Our phone number is also there. You can send a message. We offer private tutoring, and there would be classes forming pod classes. The idea is that the classes will be around 6 students large, no larger than 6 to 10, 10 maximum according to the type of students. They are the age groups. And those classes, to try to, the idea I have is to bring creativity, to bring actual teaching back into some schooling where you're trying to figure out how this child learns, what makes this child mind open up. And within that smaller, more private atmosphere, I think it happens much easier. So yeah, Nisi, hit me up and we'll talk. Hit me up and we'll talk. All right, folks, that's all I have for now. Tomorrow is Independence Day. I'm not doing a live on Independence Day. I'm going to see whatever events there are out there on Independence Day. So you will not see me tomorrow for Independence Day for the live. The next Mindful Live will be, that's what, Thursday? Today is Tuesday. Yes, Thursday. You will see the next Mindful Live at 9 p.m. The government is educating over 100,000 students. Yeah, well, I'm not looking for that many. 6 at a time. So, yeah, send that message out to people who might be considering classes too, who might be interested in that, Mr. Nathan, for president. President of what and where? Trinidad Mark asks what the topic tonight. Trinidad Mark, you're kind of real late. You could check over on YouTube. Follow me over there on YouTube. Any of you in the live who are not currently following me on YouTube, go over there. You can hit that subscribe button, Nathan Springer on YouTube. You can catch the lives on repeat over there. Trinidad Mac, you'd have to do that for tonight. You'd have to do that. But yeah, catch the lives over there, and I will see you all. Each parent is responsible for 1 to 5 children. Would it not be better for parents to... I'm listening, Ronnie. I'm not going yet. I am waiting. I saw your comments coming in, and I'm seeing that they are in pieces. I am waiting. Each parent is responsible for 1 to 5 children. Would it not be better for parents to... Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, Instagram. Peace out. Latest folks over there on Instagram. Peace out. Take the role of getting their children into specialist education. Yes. I agree. That's the service I am trying to provide. What's the question there? Yes, each parent should take the role of getting their child into specialist education. I agree. I am not saying the government should do that, but I'm saying that the way the government is doing it isn't helping. The government should be like, what the government is trying not to do is sort children into different groups. They're trying as much as they can not to do that. I think that's ill-advised. I think we do want to have some sorting of the children. I think after 7 years of primary school, you're supposed to be able to figure that all these children aren't learning everything the same way. They aren't all copy-paste of each other. So, yeah. there should be some sorting of some kind. As one I was answering Nisi, she said it was stupid that the government doesn't do it. Oh, okay. But the government, I still say it's stupid because the government is heading in the opposite direction. At one point in time in schooling, we were heading in the direction of more specializing and getting students into areas that they fit in better. But now we are heading into every student is supposed to somehow be the same and go through the same system. It's ridiculous. All right. Thank you, folks. Your live is very engaging and educational. Kudos on your foresight for providing this service. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it. And I will see you guys Thursday for the next Mindful Live. Peace out, folks. Laters. Y'all could catch my daily well, they aren't that daily anymore, but regular videos on TikTok and on Instagram. Those videos come out regularly. Catch those. There'll be one dropping tomorrow for Independence Day and all of that good stuff. So I will see you guys Thursday. Peace. Later.